And I'm not trying to sound insensitive, but like, ma'am, you really tried to sue McDonald's and the Welding Company? Girl, go sit down. Hey y'all, welcome and or welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. All right, y'all, so we just gonna be jumping right into today's case. And today we are in California, and it is July 18th, 1984. At a McDonald's in San Ysidro, California, which is the last U.S., I guess you want to call it a city. Although I do think it is considered the city of San Diego, or at least it's the county of San Diego. And it is the last U.S. city before you cross over the border into Tijuana, Mexico. So it's approximately 3:56 in the afternoon, and families are dining in. Others are pretty much just chilling while their kids play in the play place. Shout out to you if you remember McDonald's play place. I don't think they have any of those anymore, or at least there's not a lot of them. In any event, nothing new is going on here. This is usually how it is at this McDonald's. It's a pretty busy McDonald's. It's right next to the border. So this is one of the first food places that you have on the US side of the border. So a lot of people are always in and out of this McDonald's. But none of the people in this McDonald's at this moment could have ever imagined that in just a few short minutes, their lives would be changed forever. So a couple of minutes after 4 o'clock, 911 gets a call from a person saying that a child has been shot and that this child has been taken to the post office next to the McDonald's at 440 West. But the dispatcher accidentally sends the officer to the McDonald's that is on the east instead of the west, which is approximately 2 miles away from the correct McDonald's before they redirect the officer towards the right McDonald's. But what the hell is going on? Because why and how? I mean, we know how a child has been shot, but what the hell? Why has a child been shot? How did this happen? So like I said, it all started shortly before 4 o'clock p.m. when a man brandishing at least 3 guns enters this McDonald's next to the post office. One of the guns that he has is an Uzi, and he also has boxes upon boxes of ammunition with him as well. So as he enters this McDonald's, he points and aims his gun at a 16-year-old worker who is behind the counter named John Arnold. And this man pulls the trigger. However, nothing happens. And because nothing happens, John, being a 16-year-old boy, thinks that this is nothing more than a poor joke, a bad joke. And so John turns around and starts to walk away. And as John is walking away, the 22-year-old manager of the McDonald's named Neva Kane started to walk towards the front. And as she made her way to the front, this gunman shoots Neva in the face, killing her almost instantly. And immediately after shooting Neva, he aims once again at John, this time shooting him in the chest and arm before turning his attention to the lobby and demanding that everybody get on the ground. Now, upon just seeing 2 people being shot, one of the patrons of the McDonald's named Victor Rivera, who's at the McDonald's with his wife Maria and their 2 daughters, one of whom is 4 years old playing in the play area, and the other who is 1 year old and she is sitting at the table with her parents, he decides to try to de-escalate the situation. So he gets up and he tries to talk to the shooter. And in retaliation, the gunman shoots him 14 times, all the while yelling, "Shut up," at him. And by this time, his wife, Maria, had already booked it from the table and made her way to the play area to grab her 4-year-old daughter. And somehow she made it back to the table in order to grab her 1-year-old daughter as well before hiding under one of the tables. Unfortunately, after witnessing her husband Victor be shot 14 times, Maria and one of her daughters will be shot and wounded as well. Thankfully, they do survive their injuries, but this was just the start to one of the worst massacres in San Diego history. So at this point, everybody is pretty much hiding under tables and is in survival mode at this point, and trying to obey the orders of the gunman because he's already directed everybody get down on the ground. And so at this point, they're just praying that this will be over soon. Unfortunately, it would not. And the gunman would now turn his sights to a group of young women who were hiding under one of the tables. And among that group was a 19-year-old Maria Silva, who was shot and killed with a single gunshot to the chest. And he also fatally shot 9-year-old Claudia Perez 9 times and wounded her 15-year-old sister Imelda Perez with a gunshot to the hand. And also under this same table was a pregnant 18-year-old named Jackie Reyes, who was shot 48 times while shielding her 11-year-old niece Aurora Pena, who was wounded after being shot in the leg. And sadly, after shooting Aurora and Jackie, the gunman turned to Jackie's 18-month-old son Carlos Reyes and shot him once in the back. And even though all of this is going on in the inside, outside of the restaurant, not too many people were aware of the situation just yet. So people were still attempting to come to the McDonald's. And at around 4:05 p.m., a family of 3 pulled up to the restaurant. And this family of 3 consisted of Alfonso and Maricela Felix and their 4-month-old baby girl, Carlita Felix. And as they get out of their car and head towards the door, the gunman sees them approaching and he proceeds to shoot at this couple and their baby, hitting their 4-month-old daughter 3 times, shooting Maricela in the face and shooting Alfonso as well. And upon seeing his wife and baby be shot, Alfonso doesn't pay attention to his own wounds and he grabs their baby Carlita and he rushes her over to the post office and hands her off to a stranger and asks them to help. And this is what prompted that 911 call that I told you guys about in the beginning. And it's at around this same time where 3 young 11-year-old boys are coming from Yum Yum Donuts, which I think is in the same parking lot as the McDonald's or right next door. And they hear somebody yell something from across the street. However, they can't make out what this person is saying. And so they just proceed to push their bikes towards the entrance to the McDonald's. Unfortunately, the gunman sees them as well and proceeds to shoot 11-year-olds Joshua Coleman, Omar Hernandez, and David Delgado. Unfortunately, David and Omar do not survive from their wounds. And also outside at the same time is a couple, Ida and Miguel Victoria, who are 69 and 74 respectively. And the gunman opens fire on them as well. First shooting Ida and then shooting Miguel. And as Miguel is cradling Ida, he is cursing at this gunman. And the gunman ultimately comes and fires a fatal shot into Miguel before he turns his sights back into the restaurant. And it's been said by some of the surviving victims that this gunman actually had a boombox radio type of situation going on where he would listen to music as he pretty much wreaked havoc on this entire McDonald's. But like I said, he's back inside now, and towards the back of the restaurant, James would shoot and kill a 62-year-old trucker named Lawrence Verluith. And then he would turn his sights to a couple who was under the table trying to shield their son and their son's friend. And this couple was 31-year-old Blythe Herrera, who was shielding her 11-year-old son, Mateo Herrera. And her husband, Ronald Herrera, was shielding Mateo's friend, Keith Thomas. And the gunman opened fire, shooting and killing Blythe and Mateo and wounding Ron and Keith. After this, he sees more people under another table who he hadn't gotten to yet and proceeded to shoot 24-year-old Guadalupe Del Rio in the leg, wounding her. He also shot and killed her 31-year-old friend, Aridelcy Vargas, and luckily their 25-year-old friend who was under the table with them, Gloria Ramirez, was unharmed. At another booth, the gunman shot and killed 45-year-old Hugo Vasquez. And it is at this time, finally, 10 minutes after this horrific event started, the police arrive. And the first officer on the scene is Officer Miguel Rosario. And upon pulling up, he was initially headed to the post office because this is where the call came in stating that the injured baby was. So he was on his way to the post office because he had no knowledge of the carnage that was going on next door at the McDonald's. But as he's on his way to the post office, the gunman sees that the police are there. He steps out of the side door of the McDonald's and proceeds to open fire on Officer Rosario with his Uzi. And Officer Rosario does the only thing that he can do at this point, which is to take cover because he has bullets coming at him every which way from an Uzi. And the only type of gun that he has, I believe, is a .38. And so as he's taking cover, he immediately calls for backup. And over the next few minutes, the building would be surrounded by 175 officers strategically placed, and they will also be accompanied by a SWAT team. However, they were unable to make entry into the building because they didn't know what the situation was. They didn't know if there was multiple shooters. They didn't know if they just didn't know the situation inside of the McDonald's. And they were unable to shoot this gunman because, once again, they didn't even know, they didn't have a description. They didn't know how many there were. And plus, a lot of the glass had already been shattered. And so that, coupled with the glare from the sun, the officers were barely able to see inside of the restaurant to get a clear shot. However, at 5:05 p.m., the officers on scene and the SWAT team were instructed to shoot to kill if they were able to get a clear shot on the perpetrator. However, them being able to get a clear shot on this perpetrator would take another 12 minutes. And in those 12 minutes, the gunman walked into the kitchen area where he found 6 McDonald's employees hiding and proceeded to open fire on them. Now, one of the employees, 18-year-old Margarita Padilla, she saw that this gunman was about to shoot them, and she ended up grabbing one of her co-workers, 17-year-old Wendy Flanagan, and tried to run before the shooter opened fire. And thankfully, she was able to save Wendy's life. Unfortunately, she would not be able to escape the gunfire, and she was shot and killed, along with her co-workers, 21-year-old Paulina Lopez and 19-year-old Elsa Fierro. And another one of the co-workers, a 17-year-old Albert Leos, he tried to run as well, but the gunman would actually end up emptying his gun on Albert before returning back to the front to reload his gun. And by this time, Wendy and 4 other McDonald's workers, plus a customer and her baby, were able to make it into the basement and hide in a utility closet. Now, at first, they were actually going for the emergency exit to just get out of there altogether. However, the emergency exit was locked because McDonald's thought that its employees was going to steal food. While the gunman was at the front reloading, somehow Albert, who he had emptied his gun on, did not die. He actually was able to somehow crawl his way to the basement, where he was able to hide with the rest of his co-workers and that customer and her baby. And fortunately, somehow, by the grace of God, he was able to survive his injuries, and he would later on become a San Diego police officer himself. And he said that it's because of this event that he turned to law enforcement. So after the gunman reloaded his weapon, he noticed that there was a fire truck that was passing the McDonald's, and he opened fire on this fire truck, wounding one of the occupants. And finally, at 5:17 p.m. on July 18th, 1984, the gunman hops down from the McDonald's service counter and walks towards one of the McDonald's doors, where 27-year-old SWAT team member Charles Foster was positioned on the roof of the post office directly across from where this gunman just walked. And he had a clear view of this gunman's chest area. He couldn't see his face or his head, but he did have a very clear view of this gunman's torso, and he followed orders, and he was able to fire one single shot into this gunman, severing his aorta, killing him instantly. And it is only then, after this gunman is down, that police and SWAT are able to enter the building and see the true nature of what just happened over the past 77 minutes. Because yes, although police arrived 10 minutes after this shooting started, they would not make entry until 77 minutes later. So who was this gunman? He was 41-year-old James Huberty, and he was born on July 11th, 1942 in Canton, Ohio. And he was the youngest of 2 kids to his parents, Earl and Ickle Huberty. And when he was around 8 years old, his mom would decide to peace out on the family. She didn't want to deal with it anymore. The dad, Earl, had decided to buy a farm, and his mom did not want to live on a farm, and she apparently did not want to have children either. So she left the family when James was 8 years old, And he did not take very well to this. He kind of started to withdraw from others, and growing up, he was not able to make very many friends. And he mainly focused on the things that he was interested in, which was not people. He pretty much spent all his time doing target practice. He was a gun enthusiast. And James was bullied throughout his school years, but he didn't let that stop him from graduating from Wayndale High School in 1960 and going on to college, where he graduated with honors in 1964 and getting his funeral director's license. And then in 1965, he would obtain his embalming license. And for a little while, he worked in the embalming field, but he wasn't really good. Like I told y'all, he wasn't really good with talking to people. And so can you imagine a man who's not good at talking to people trying to talk to people's families after their loved ones have passed away? It's not a good look. And so after 2 years of being in the embalming industry, he decided that he would change careers, and he decided to become a welder. And he was actually really good at this, and he made some good money. But I forgot to mention, back in 1965, he married a woman named Edna, who he had met while he was in college. And after he became a welder, he and Edna moved to Louisville, Ohio, where they would create a pretty good life for themselves, and they would have 2 kids named Zelia and Cassandra in 1972 and 1974 respectively. But even though James had a good job and the family was doing pretty well, James was very abusive, but not only to his wife, but to his kids as well. And Edna tried to get him help for this. She tried to get him to go to counseling, but James would absolutely refuse this. And over the next couple of years, James became increasingly paranoid. He would start to believe that Presidents Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, along with the whole US government, was conspiring against him. And it didn't help that in 1982, James was laid off from his welding job. And mind you, he had been working with this company for years at this point. And so the fact that he was laid off kind of solidified for him the fact that everything was a big conspiracy against him. And after losing this job, James started to get worse. He kind of went into a downward spiral where he started hearing voices, and on multiple occasions he would threaten to exit this world voluntarily and take his whole family with him. But in 1983, it would seem as though James's luck would kind of start to rise again, because this is when he found a new welding job. But this good luck would only last for about 5 weeks, because after only 5 weeks of being at this welding plant, the plant shut down, causing James to be out of work once again. And so after the plant closure, James decided that he was going to move his family from Ohio to Tijuana, Mexico, because he felt like it was more like a stick it to him type of move. He felt like him being a good welder, he was going to start making so much money in Tijuana, and he was going to show them who was boss type of thing. However, when the family moved over to TJ, James was not able to find a job. Everything that he thought was going to happen didn't. And so he ended up moving his family from Tijuana, Mexico, back across the border to San Ysidro, California. And it's here that they moved into a small apartment building, which was a big step down for James. But anyway, so on July 15th, 1984, James told his wife that he believed that he had mental health problems. And 2 days later, on July 17th, he would call the San Diego Mental Health Clinic and pretty much try to get help for whatever it was that he was feeling. He was just trying to get help for his mental health. And so once he called the San Diego Mental Health Clinic, they asked him a series of 5 questions, and then they told him that they would call him back in a couple of hours. And so James sat patiently by the phone, but that call never came. And when he realized that they wasn't going to call him back, he took off on his motorcycle for about an hour, and his wife had no idea. She just didn't know where he had gone for that hour. But when he came back home, he seemed to have been in a better headspace. And so, good, right? But unbeknownst to James, the call that he made to the San Diego Mental Health Clinic, the receptionist logged his call down as a non-crisis because of his demeanor. He wasn't frantic. He was very calm, cool, collected. And this receptionist just felt like he did not show any signs of, I guess, urgency. And all non-crisis calls were to be handled within 48 hours, which is why they didn't call him back within the couple of hours that he thought they would call him back in. And so then on July 18th, 1984, which was the day of the massacre, earlier that morning, James had to attend traffic court. He had done he had committed some type of traffic violation where he needs to go to court for. And while he was in court, he explained to the judge that he didn't know that the act that he committed was a violation in California because he's from Ohio, and apparently there it's not a violation. And the judge was a pretty lenient judge, and he threw out the ticket. So James would not have to pay a $75 fine. His ticket was just thrown out. And after court, him and Edna took the kids to the San Diego Zoo, and as they was walking around, James told Edna that his life was effectively over. And he was pretty much referring to the fact that the mental health clinic hadn't called him back. And then he proceeded to say to Edna, well, society had its chance. And after a long day at the zoo, the family ended up having lunch at a McDonald's in Claremont before going home. And once they got home, Edna was just exhausted from the day, and she decided to take a nap. And at some point, James would come into the room and wake Edna up and let her know that he was about to leave, and told her that he just wanted to kiss her goodbye. And Edna gave him a kiss and asked him where he was going. And James said to Edna, I'm going hunting for humans. And I don't know if Edna was just slow, stupid, dumb, or just, I don't know. I'm not trying to be judgmental here, but your husband tell you that he about to go hunting for humans, and you don't call the police? You don't alert nobody? I'm just saying. But it is then that he proceeds to leave the house and drive the less than 1 block to the McDonald's where the events of today's case took place. And so after the massacre happened, the McDonald's, it was initially going to try to reopen. However, I think that due to backlash of the community, it decided to not reopen. The McDonald's was demolished, and the land that the McDonald's sat on was donated to the city of San Diego. And in 1988, it was sold to Southwestern College, where a memorial was built in honor of the 21 lives that were lost that day in 1984. And some of the victims of the massacre tried to sue McDonald's and the city of San Diego Police Department because they got there 10 minutes after the massacre started, but didn't enter till 77 minutes after it started. And so they felt like the San Diego police were negligent in that way. But unfortunately, both lawsuits against McDonald's and the San Diego Police Department were dismissed. And it was said that McDonald's or no other establishment has a duty of care to protect its patrons from an unforeseen assault of anybody, pretty much. And I mean, that's pretty understandable. Like, you can't really say, hey, McDonald's, this crazy man came in here and shot me in your establishment. You're responsible, because no, McDonald's wouldn't be responsible for that. Now, I don't know why they dismissed the case against San Diego Police Department, because I'm just saying, but it was determined that there was no fault of the San Diego Police Department. But Edna, James's wife, also tried to sue McDonald's and James's former employer at the welding company that he worked at for a long time. She tried to sue both of them for $5 million, pretty much saying that James's murder spree was triggered by poor diet. You know, McDonald's food made him crazy. And the fact that he was working around highly poisonous materials without proper protection at the welding company. And her case was dismissed in 1987, and she died of breast cancer in 2003. And I'm not trying to sound insensitive, but like, ma'am, you really tried to sue McDonald's and the welding company? Girl, go sit down. In total, 21 people lost their lives that day. Elsa Fierro, Neva Kane, Michelle Carnicos, Maria Silva, Gloria Gonzalez, Blythe Herrera, Mateo Herrera, Paulina Lopez, Margarita Padilla, Claudia Perez, Jose Perez, Carlos Reyes, Jackie Reyes, Victor Rivera, Arisdelcy Vargas, Hugo Vasquez, Lawrence Verluis, David Delgado, Omar Hernandez, Miguel Victoria, and Ida Victoria. and 19 others were injured. Juan Acosta, John Arnold, Anthony Atkins, Astolfo Segundo, Joshua Coleman, Guadalupe del Rio, Astolfo Felix, Carlita Felix, Marisela Felix, Ronald Herrera, Albert Leos, Francisco Lopez, Aurora Peña, Imelda Perez, Maria Rivera, Mireya Rivera, Keith Thomas, Juan Tacano, and Keith Villegas. Whew, that was a tough one, y'all. But that does conclude today's case. Thank you all so very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Okay, James, your bitch ass. James, your bitch ass. Whew. Oh no. And this is to his parents, Earl and Isel. I think that's her name. Isel, Ickley. I don't know how to say this woman's name. Huberty. Isel. I don't know how y'all say this. Icle. Icle. Ickley. Isley? I don't know.